Happy Wednesday, my brothers and my sisters. Thank you for joining us again for another Wednesday Bible study here with us at Six Mount Zion Baptist Church. We're appreciative that you have committed to joining us for this very important lesson as we shift our focus on this last Wednesday of the month, as we have just completed our previous Bible study series, Chasing the Lion. We're shifting now. We're using Priscilla Shira's Bible study entitled Elijah, Faith and Fire. And I believe that there's some very essential and important things that we're going to share here. So why don't you now, if you don't mind, help us by becoming evangelists and share the word. And we're on YouTube. SMZBC worships. There are those persons who are listening online, 203-9011. We're on Facebook and Twitter. And so I don't know what Facebook is doing with watch parties, but if you can get a watch party started, fine. If not, you can just share it and just reshare the video, and people will be able to view it that way. If you're on Twitter, if you click the link, it'll take you to Periscope. If you're just going to watch on Twitter, then just retweet that. We're also on our church's website, smzbc.org, as well. And you can always get this by logging on to your Apple or Android phones if you have our app downloaded, Six Mount Zion Baptist Church, Richmond. So we are glad that you are with us. I know last week we lost a few of you because it was Inauguration Wednesday, and we are thankful and excited, hopeful about the future direction of our country. And so if you missed last week's Bible study, which a lot of our regular people did, then you can just go back and check it out. All right. We're going to do an intro Bible study for this week. I want you to keep this scripture in mind as we begin this study, and we may come back to it later. 1 Peter 5th chapter, verse 10. You see it right there on the screen. It's a New International Version.
And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast.
Priscilla Shira starts this Bible study by talking about a ballerina. Now, what words come to your mind when you see a ballerina? You can type the answers in the chat as I'm sharing. What words come to mind when you see a ballerina? When you see a ballerina, and go ahead and use the chat context. And whether it's YouTube or Facebook, Twitter, whatever, wherever you're watching, even on our website, you can type answers into the chat. If you're logging in Periscope, you can do the same. So go ahead and type in an answer. What words come to mind when you see a ballerina? Shira actually says, graceful dancer, somebody who's fit. You may think of the Nutcracker, some type of piece where you see a presentation that is fully displayed by dancers. All right, you think of dancers that you've seen on screen or plays that have a lot of dancing. You may even think about dancers in your church, the praise dancers. But she starts the first lesson off with this story, and I'm gonna share. She says, I was scrolling Instagram, my Instagram feed one day, when a particular image snagged my attention. It startled me, she said. Sort of grossed me out, to tell the truth. You know how you can see something that's a little disturbing to you, a little provocative, and even though you really want to turn away, you somehow can't seem to stop looking. It was kind of like that. Half of the image showed a beautifully poised, and I'm still sharing the story that she shared, perfectly arched ballerina's foot, smooth, elegant, dainty. Her cream colored slipper fit like a satin glove, along with a silk ribbon woven meticulously up her ankle, completing the classic look. It was everything you'd expect from a ballerina, like a piece of fine art. So pretty, precise. But then on the other side, and this other side told a much different story, the real story. Directly next to the dancer's lovely, shapely right foot was her other foot. The bare foot, without its slipper, and the contrast was visibly striking. Whole nails were missing. Several of the knuckles, swollen, red, were bandaged, blistered, bleeding. Fragments of old stained gauze remained stuck to oozing sores. Knobs of comforted, misshapen bones bulged grotesquely beneath the skin. And along with the picture ran the following caption, or words similar to this effect. Hear me today. Everyone wants the glory, but few are willing to pay the price required to get it. Hear that today. And that's something that you probably need to write down as we are thinking through this Bible study. Everyone wants the glory, but few are willing to pay the price. The price that is required to get it. Now, the truth is we live in a world now where we just want the end result. We want the highlight reel. We don't want the practice session. We want to, if you're a sports fan and you're watching basketball, you want the dunks and the 3-pointers. You don't want the methodical play that led up to the exciting moment. Whatever it is, you want to get to the end, and you don't want to hear about the work that is put in. You don't want to hear about the practice session. You don't want to hear about the years of hard work. We don't want to hear about the consistent pattern of sacrifice, not the going over and over and over, the repeated steps for a moment. You don't want to hear about all of that. You don't want to hear about the stretching or the soreness or what Priscilla Shower says. You don't want to hear about the cold, sleepy mornings and everything that it takes to get there. Many of us only want to see the ballerina, and we don't want to think about what she has done and what she had to go through to get to the performance. And you begin to think about that in your own life and how that applies. Everyone wants the glory, but few are willing to pay the price required to get it. Everybody likes being a Monday morning quarterback. Everybody likes being a critic. Everybody likes talking about what they would do if they were in that moment. But the truth is, a lot of the reasons people are where they are, they're there because of all of the other moments that leads them up to that moment. They're there because of the practice sessions. They're there because of the repeated effort day after day, moment after moment. They're there because of the rehearsals. And, every time you see, even as you see our worship, you don't know how many times, whether it's the choir running over a song, thinking it through, singing through the parts, the dancers, the same thing. How many video takes does it take to get one of those dance moves in a synchronized session? How much time goes into reading scripture for those who are teaching church school? How much time goes through you on your job getting to the final piece that people are looking at? Many of us want to see the final product, but we don't want to see what it takes to get to the end. Priscilla Shower said something that I've been saying for years now here at 6 Mount Zion. And I quote her, "Truth be told, when we scroll through our social media feeds, we only want to see the ballerina slipper. It's prettier. It's more palatable. The worn parts, the beat up parts, the dousing of the wildfire of our romantic imaginations. Reality is too much for us to deal with." And when you begin, this is what we portray. And this is why I love folk who are real in the moment. They don't mind you seeing their transparent being, their authenticity. That's why I get turned off by social media. I really have started to kind of fade off of Facebook for that very reason, because everybody's life is perfect. when you're reading at it. Nobody's talking about the struggle. Every married couple is living a blissful life. Every person is talking about how great they are as a parent, how great their parents are. There are no struggles. Very rarely do you hear people talk about what they really go through on a day-to-day basis. And when you begin to look at that, you will think that that's the way life is, that you don't struggle. There are no ups. I mean, there are no downs with the ups. There are no cloudy days with the sunny days. You constantly chasing what somebody else got, because what somebody else got, they're not being authentic and transparent about. They're not talking about their bloody knuckles. They're not talking about the foot that's not wrapped up in the cute little ballerina. Yeah, you see the end result, but you don't see the struggle. Again, everyone wants the glory, but are you really willing to pay the price required to get it? If we're honest with ourselves and with each other, we'd admit that this also is how we tend to read the Bible. And one of the things that we're going to try to do when we look at Elijah, or begin this conversation of dealing with Elijah and also talking about others, is, I want you to begin to kind of wrestle with this. When you think about certain biblical characters, and you see the question there, what highlights immediately come to mind? When you're thinking about Noah, what comes to mind? When you're thinking about Abraham, what comes to mind? When you're thinking about Moses or Samuel or Esther, even when you're thinking about Jesus, what comes to mind? Are you thinking about some of the struggles? Are you thinking about Noah's drunken exploits? Are you thinking about, before you go to Abraham as the father of the faith, are you also thinking about how Abel was ready to sell out Sarah? Are you thinking about the many ups and downs of Moses, that the fact that Moses didn't even get to the promised land because of his lack of faith? Are you thinking about these things when it comes to Samuel and Esther? We studied Esther here at the church. And yes, if I perish, I perish. That's one of the greatest biblical quotes of all time. But there were other things that led up to this story. Even with Jesus, as much as we talk about Jesus, a lot of Jesus's life was gritty and grimy. And it was against what we perceive and believe are parts of the Christian journey. Now, those are just people that we read about in the Bible. Think about people that you know, people that you are in relationship. Think about your own story. The stuff that people know about you and the stuff that people don't. And what parts of their story do you and don't you know? I mentioned last week, as we studied Dr. Martin Luther King, always during this federal holiday, and I had to speak. And one of the things I shared was that the last 2 years of Dr. King's life, he was one of the most, he was a very unpopular person. All right, now when you tell his story in retrospect, you always hearing what? I have a dream. And you hear the speech, I've been to the mountaintop. But you don't know about the failures of St. Augustine. You don't know about the failure of Albany. You don't know about the shifts in Chicago with trying to look at housing conditions, and even a fight in Memphis a couple of days before he died, how intruders took over a march. These are things that you don't know, but it's easy to take those things out because we just want to see the end result. Shaya says in her book that when she looked at Elijah's story, and this is what motivated and pushed her to wanting to study it. She said, I distinctly remember when I came to Elijah's narrative in 1 Kings, how I felt completely consumed by the startling boldness of his faith, especially the one big highlight that stands out from his story in Mount Carmel. So we're going to look at the scripture. We're going to start it on the next frame here in 1 Kings. And I'm going to let some of it roll. I might come in and interject at a portion of it. But it's an exciting story. So, it's 15, 20 verses of it. And I want you to stay tuned in. Don't tune out. As you're listening to this text, think about the elements from this holy encounter that demonstrates the prophet's faith courage, commitment, and prayer. Think about that.
Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table.
So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said,
How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him.
But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them,
I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God.
Then all the people said,
What you say is good.
Elijah said to the prophets of Baal,
Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire.
So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon.
Baal, answer us.
They shouted, but there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them.
Shout louder,
He said,
surely he is a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened.
So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people,
Come here to me.
They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying,
Your name shall be Israel.
With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them,
Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again.
He said, and they did it again.
Do it a 3rd time.
He ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed,
Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again.
Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried,
The Lord, he is God.
The Lord, he is God.
All right. So yeah, I told you it was a pretty exciting piece of scripture. And Elijah, the prophet, I believe as we study him, you're going to be more and more excited about who Elijah was. But imagine if Elijah was our guest teacher for Bible study. And based upon what you just heard from that one particular story. We got many more that we're going to look at, but that one particular story. What are 3 questions you like to ask Elijah about his memories from that day? If Elijah, and you can go ahead hit us up in the chat if you want to. Now I know some of you have gotten used to just listening and not responding in the chat, so and try to break yourself out of that habit now and go ahead and re-engage us again in conversation. What are some questions that you would like to ask Elijah about that day? Now the author Priscilla Shower says, I try to picture how Elijah might interact with me. While I be zeroed in on the spectacular moments of the day, and there were some spectacular moments, from pouring water repeatedly on the altar, building the trench, the water encompassing the fire, encompassing the water in the trenches. Also, Elijah was a comedian, pretty much antagonizing the people that they need to shout harder, or that God may have been on vacation, on break, couldn't hear them, etc. She says, I be zeroed in. While I be zeroed in spectacular moments, I wonder if he intentionally point to other things that are more simple, more foundational. Hear what I'm saying? Even difficult things that made up the underbelly of his journey with God. What she's saying is, I wonder if he'd accentuate these quieter happenings from early in his life. In passages preceding 1 Kings, the 18th chapter, verses that are filled with refining and pruning. She goes on to say that these encounters leading up to Mount Carmel were precisely where the Holy Spirit seemed to shine a spotlight for her as she was reading. They captured her. They tell us that Elijah didn't just show up out of thin air knowing exactly what to do and exactly how to do it. And I hope that you're hearing where this partners with what we were saying. A lot of people want to get to the end, but they don't want to do the work that takes us back from the end to the beginning. She says they tell us Elijah didn't just show up out of thin air, knowing exactly what to do and exactly how to do it. All that faith and courage, all that boldness and confidence and prayer, all that fire, hear me, did not just happen. All right. Each of these impressive strengths we see in him had been fortified. This is the author saying, by what she perceived to be earlier struggles, during earlier challenges, during earlier forays into trust and obedience. This moment of biblical proportion atop Mount Carmel followed a much less public process. And I want you to think about your life and how these moments, and as I read and prepared, or tried to prepare at least for this introduction conversation, I began to ask myself some of these things. And sometimes you got to reflect back on it. And you got to think back on those moments, not just in the lives of other people, but even focus on that, how the small things that you never hear about. Your story, the part of the stories that you don't hear. Just last week, you're looking at Joe Biden, you're looking at Kamala Harris, and even last week as I was looking at ABC News in the morning, how all of these women across the country and young girls were excited, and it was this swearing in moment that culminated everything. But the truth is, there are a lot of people who don't know the story of this district attorney in California, don't know the battles, don't know the struggles of growing up in a diverse family, in a community that was not always accepted. They don't know how Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris became Vice President. Same thing with Joe Biden. Unless you've really been paying attention, many folk don't know this is like Joe Biden's 3rd time running for president. They don't really, they don't know the struggles that not just with Beau Biden dying, but his infant daughter and his wife dying in a car crash, and many other struggles. They don't know his involvement in the Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas story, and even how the mistakes of Senator Batten showed up and helped build him for the future. And I'm just talking about two very public figures, but think about the people that you know. Think about your own journey, where you are right now. How many no's did you have to face to get to the yes? How many ups did you have to, how many downs did you have to hit before you got to the up? How much time did it really take? How much schooling? How much time on your job? How many relationships before you got to the right one? And this is what I believe the author is wanting us to wrestle with. Most of us want what Elijah had and to be who Elijah was. But we've got to ask ourselves, are we willing to do what Elijah did to get what Elijah got? Most of us want the faith. Most of us want the courage. Most of us want the boldness. Most of us want a prayer life that pushes back the darkness. Most of us want to be that character that possesses an unflinching backbone. Most of us want a conviction, a holy conviction that doesn't bow to popular opinion. We want to be who Elijah was. A brother that was brimming over with the fullness of God's spirit and power, brave enough to speak truth to authority with love and grace, singularly focused, inspiring others' allegiance to the one true God, people who leave behind a lasting impact on future generations. You want to be that type of Elijah figure. But right here, y'all, is where the battle is to be waged. On the thin edge that exists, hear me, between our eager participation about the next level where God is calling us and the prickling fear we sometimes feel about what it will cost us to get there. That's when many of us find ourselves teetering on that edge. And I feel like since we've been in COVID, most of what we've been sharing ought to have been challenging that type of thought. We just really went through a Bible study that focused on seven survival skills. Things that really made you think about your faith. Really, that things that really made you think about your trust in a God that sometimes you can't see. Sometimes God will have you doing foolish things, looking foolish. But all of that will cause you to look at how you get there. And sometimes it's going to take some work. It really is. Like the ballerina's foot. You don't lose nails on your toe without doing something that may cause you some pain. You don't scrape up there are many twists and turns that happen before you hit the perfect one. This is what this thing is about. You can read the Mount Carmel story and be like, man, this whole Elijah's faith was crazy. And it was. But you don't develop that type of crazy faith without some lumps along the way. All right. There's some scriptures that speak to us as it relates to this. And we're going to go ahead and head toward the close. A couple of scriptures. Let's check them out.
All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them.
So what does this text say is the potential cost of your building faith? And we know Hebrews 11. It is the hall of faith, as some call it, the wall of faith, as some call it. Shara says this, in Hebrews 11, she sees faith heroes who didn't make comfort their primary life ambition. So she asked the question, how might this refocusing away from comfort and toward calling be a part of your process? Faith, again, is going to require you to be uncomfortable. It's going to require you to be in a place where ease is not the focal point. It's not. You look at the stories of all these faith warriors, faith heroes that we read in the 11th chapter, man, they really had to step out on faith. They really had to trust and believe that the end result, even if they did not see it happening, was going to be to the glory of God, and they were just a conduit or a part of the process. All right. So if that's you and you're trying to be a faith warrior, comfort can't be your primary life ambition. All right. Let's check out another one.
And so it was with me, brothers and sisters. When I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you, except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness with great fear and trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power.
So what does this text say is the potential cost of your building character? It's the same thing in 1 Corinthians, the 2nd chapter, right here. We see a man who was unmotivated by acceptance, all right, by cultural acceptance. He was indifferent to the approval of his peers, all right. He was uninterested in impressing other folk with his own ability. Listen, unmotivated by acceptance, indifferent to approval, uninterested in impressing. All right. So, again, Shara wants us to wrestle with this question. How might being less concerned with public perception be a part of your process? That's just something to think about. You can hit us up in the chat with that answer. How might being less concerned? And for a lot of us, we are motivated by acceptance. We are focused on approval, and we are very interested in impressing others. And impressing man, impressing woman can oftentimes lead you in the opposite direction of your calling. All right, check out another one.
But before all this, they will lay hands on you and persecute you. They will deliver you to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name. And so you will bear testimony to me. But make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers, sisters, relatives, and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me. But not a hair of your head will perish. Stand firm, and you will win life.
All right, let's keep rolling. How might learning to endure opposition be part of your process? Luke 21, another great scriptural example, makes it clear. It's disciples, Jesus's disciples, are being challenged not to avoid persecution, but be prepared to face it. All right. A part of getting to where God wants you to get to will require. Sometimes it's going to require persecution, and you can't be running from it. You can't be scared of it. All right. Don't try to avoid it. Be prepared to face it. And then out of it, you become testimonies. You'll have a testament of God's glory in the middle of it. All right, one more. Let's look at Matthew.
And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you.
How might developing a deeper purity and fervency in prayer be a part of your process? And we see it here in Matthew the 6th chapter, where crowds of religious people are being instructed by Jesus, listen, to dismantle the veneer of pious tradition, exchanging it for a real, authentic, fervent relationship with God. How then will that that focus in our focusing in our conversation with God and help us. Many times we spend a lot of time in tradition instead of being real, authentic, and focused, fervent in our relationship with God. The process of working toward these goals will not be easy, but at the end of the day, it will be worth it. Hear me today. The process of working toward these goals will not be easy, but I believe it will be all worth it. I'm excited about this study of this character, Elijah, in the Bible. All right. And I want you to know that this process is helped by a pattern that Priscilla Shara actually says is detected in men and women of God whom she most admires, people who live in passionate relationship with God, people who stand strong in the midst of adversity, people who experience God in a real and loving way, and people whose prayers pulsate, she says, with power. People who hear God's voice and people who see God's activity. These are the people who are unapologetic about their faith. And so I want to wrap up with this. It might require you to spend some time in the dark room of development. If you're trying to get to this place, the people like Elijah have committed themselves to the things that God's people do in order to receive what only God can give. It will take patience. It will take practice. It will take waiting. It will take endurance. Hear me. It's going to take time. These people have bumps and bruises, scars and injuries to show for it. But only those willing to investigate more deeply will get a chance to see and learn from the processes they've endured. And that's the question. Is that you? I want to be like that. And so that's what we're going to do with Elijah over the next couple of weeks. Listen, people of faith show us in their lives that it's going to take you dedicating time. It's going to take you devoting time, talent, and treasures. It's going to take you sacrificing your own selfish desires and ambitions. Hear me. You might need to take a screenshot of this and check yourself. It's going to take you breaking off some unhealthy relationships, upholding your daily spiritual disciplines, and I hoped that that your time in prayer and fasting, as you wrap up prayer and fasting this week, I pray that your praying and fasting will have helped shape some of your daily spiritual disciplines. You don't have to stop right there. You can keep on praying. You can keep on fasting. You've got to dare to risk bold allegiance. You've got to resist a lifestyle of legalistic, condemning perfectionism. You got to receive God's grace each day. And Uber Conference, I'm reading this for the sake of those of you who are listening and not being able to see. You got to refuse political correctness over righteousness, and you got to reach out to the weak and the disenfranchised. Finally, you got to believe God for more and pray the bold prayers to prove it. That's our introduction for the day, my brothers and my sisters. I thank you. I'm looking forward to this journey as we look at this biblical giant named Elijah. I pray that today's Bible study will have helped you. Tomorrow, you are welcome to join us on prayer, 804-203-9011 at 7 a.m. Friday, if you know anyone that is in need of some groceries, meat, possibly vegetables and fruits, something to drink, etc. Meet us here at the church at 12:30. We start serving at 12:45. And we're here for worship on Sunday. We're looking forward to a mighty word and a mighty ministry of music. Thank you, my brothers and my sisters, for being with us. Mount family members, the Zoom number is there. I missed most of you last week. I wasn't even here for midday last week because I was at a funeral. And then there was a couple of folk that got on in the evening. But we're back. We're back. So jump on Zoom with us, Uber Conference. Hang on, and we're going to talk. All right. I love you guys. If you're not a member, then join us next Wednesday at the same time in the same place.